Battlefields have changed and technology has evolved, but our commitment to constitutional principles has weathered every war. And every war has come to an end.
Is there somebody in the administration that's in charge of selling this to the American people?
Well, in my building, it's the Secretary of State.
I mean, somebody specifically who has the responsibility of explaining to the American people why we're doing this, that the American people think we've already done.
You know, the only thing I would add, I mean, both our secretaries are heavily involved. It's a top priority for both Secretary Gates and Secretary Clinton. And of course, Vice President Biden was tasked with President Obama right off the bat to lead our government's efforts. But in terms of a government spokesperson, I guess that's...
What you're both indicating is that there is none. And I'm suggesting that there is a key problem here because the American people thought they bought this, used it, and finished with it. And they're done with it and don't have to make any further investments. And it seems to be not the case. And these kinds of things are going to be very, very difficult to do in the ensuing months, if not years, given all the givens, both the realities and the political terms that we have to come to. And I'll move on to something else. Is there any war in this region, in the entire region, that we can afford to ever finally leave?
You know, I don't want to speak outside the lane of, you know, my particular portfolio stretches from Egypt up through Iraq and Iran down
Yemen.
Can
we afford to leave Egypt? Can we afford to leave Libya? Can we afford to leave anywhere?
I think that we have profound national interest in this part of the world, countering weapons of mass destruction, countering violent extremism, energy security, the safety and security of Israel and our other strategic partners. So I think we are heavily invested in this part of the world. We have a sizable presence in this part of the world. We are likely to remain postured at a pretty high level, even as we draw down from Iraq. So I don't know whether the question is ever, but we are...
Drawdown means 5 to 7 years and billions of dollars. You start multiplying that across a region where everything is 5 to 7 years. That's going to shift to 5 to 7 years by the time we get to 6 years. And it's going to cost more billions of dollars. I'm not advocating leaving this place yet, but I just want to know, because of the lack of an answer to my first question, if there's nobody in charge of selling it, nobody's going to buy it.
Yes, sir. I was wondering if you were aware of the Act of 1871.
I'm not aware of any particular act in 1871. Is there something that you're referring to in particular?
With no constitutional authority to do so, Congress created a separate form of government for the District of Columbia. It took our organic constitution and replaced it with a corporate constitution. So America is not even a country; it's a corporation, and that's what this healthcare is about. Control of our schools, our food, everything, every control aspect of our life is under this. And people need to wake up.
You're talking about billions of dollars in supporting a partner that's richer than we are in many ways. Not really, but they seem to have some bucks. And they're going into financial partnerships with other people, which means they're cheating on us.
Representative Ackerman, we have no intention of leaving Iraq. I think it was pretty clear in our opening statements, all three of us, and in fact we've asked for assistance.
The American people think we've left. They think we've made the political decision that we've... Here's the problem. You have no intention of leaving, and everybody else in the country, except those who are really finely tuned, which is a very limited audience, thinks we've already done that.
Our troops and our military families understand this, and they mentioned to me their concern about whether the country fully appreciates what's happening. I think about a letter I received from a naval officer, a reservist who had just returned from a deployment to Afghanistan, and he wrote me, "I'm concerned that our work in Afghanistan is fading from memory." And he went on to ask that we do more to keep this conflict alive and focused in the hearts and minds of our own people.
I can't get my f***ing Netflix to work.
dangerous missions.
It involved a rogue agency accountable to absolutely nobody.
Covert operations.
Operations were being done without the knowledge of the American public, but in their name.
And
That the United States helped create and was behind the Taliban. And if they believe it, and they're living with it, the American people should know this as well.
Connection to the Contra War became fully known by the American public.
The reality of the Iran-Contra affair is that aircraft loaded with weapons took off from airports in the southern United States and flew into Central America, where the guns were unloaded and the planes were then loaded with illegal narcotics. And these were then flown back to the United States.
I myself helped to refuel those planes that were loaded with cocaine going into the U.S., knowing the fact that they were going to be seized when they landed in the U.S. And every time I asked, well, what happened to the plane that we just refueled? He said, well, they changed the flight plan in the middle of the flight. And this happened 4, 5, 6 times. And I said, nah, there's something wrong with this picture.
could the conspiracy theorists be correct? Is this the real secret of the Iran-Contra affair? And it wasn't just arms for hostages, but drugs for arms as well.
In January of 1986, George H.W. Bush came to Guatemala, and I said, we do have some intelligence that the Contras are heavily involved in drug trafficking out of Ilopango Airport. And he smiled at me and didn't say a word, just shook my hand and walked away from me.
Now that decision to walk away from Afghanistan was the decision not of Ronald Reagan, but of President George Herbert Walker Bush. And of course, as we walked away, the anti-Soviet Mujahideen broke into warring factions. The chaos and misery was predictable. But of course, we just walked away. We let them just go down into the depths of misery and of conflict and of self-mutilation of that society. Eventually, during the Clinton years, our government made a secret pact with Saudi Arabia and Pakistan to end the chaos in Afghanistan by introducing a new force called the Taliban.
A perpetual war, through drones, through special forces, or troop deployments, will prove self-defeat. America cannot take strikes wherever we choose. Our actions are bound by consultations with partners and respect for state sovereignty.
Operation Fast and Furious was first exposed in 2011. One question remains. Why? Why did the U.S. Department of Justice authorize a covert operation to send thousands of military-style assault weapons across the Mexican border and keep it secret from Mexico?
Or resort to kidnapping and other criminal enterprises to fund their operations.
January 1970. The United States enters the second decade of the Vietnam War. In the heart of a region known as the Golden Triangle, an area responsible for the majority of the world's opium production, the CIA recruited local tribesmen to help the U.S. war effort against North Vietnam. Under the leadership of General Vang Pao, they became known as the Secret Army. The good news was that Pao was bitterly anti-communist. The bad news was that he and his fellow freedom fighters were notorious drug dealers.
All our allies in Vietnam made their livelihood by selling heroin around the world, right in the brains and veins of our GIs, to our kids, to my brother. And they were protected because that was how they supported themselves. Congress wouldn't pay for them.
It has even been alleged that the CIA's own covertly owned airline, Air America, was actively engaged in the transport of opium and heroin on behalf of Van Pao.
Vietnam was a new era for CIA. They learned how easy it was to move drugs using not only Air America in the local area, but military transport.
The massive reality of the Vietnam era is that the CIA runs drugs. This has to do with the fact that the budgets of the CIA are limited, and the ambition of these aggressors that are in these agencies, these ambitions are unlimited.
And so our nation went to war. We have now been at war for well over a decade. I won't review the full history.
But the Saudis and the Pakistanis were insistent. And they thought they could control the Taliban, and they would use the Taliban, control of the Taliban, to control Afghanistan. And of course, America just went along with it. President Bill Clinton and his administration signed on to that deal. Well, it was an easy way out. The Saudis and we're going to provide so much money and assistance. And the Pakistanis were there. And of course then people didn't realize that the Pakistani military and the ISI, who we have since proven, were actually radical Islamicists themselves. They were the allies of the worst anti-American radicals in that region. So, in reality, America, in the mid-1990s, was covertly supporting the Taliban. We covertly supported its creation, and we made sure that our aid was channeled into those areas that supported the Taliban, but we shortchanged all the other non-radical Islamicists like Massoud and others who were there and didn't get that same level of aid. That, and most importantly, the people of Afghanistan believed then, as they do now, that the United States helped create and was behind the Taliban.
Let me finish, man. Now, this is part of free speech, is you being able to speak, but also you listening, and me being able to speak.
Now, beyond Afghanistan, we must define our effort not as a boundless global war on terror, but rather as a series of persistent, targeted efforts to dismantle specific networks of violent extremists that threaten America.
What will be the standard for how we kill Americans in America?
In many cases, this will involve partnerships with other countries. Already, thousands of Pakistani soldiers have lost their lives fighting extremists. In Yemen, we are supporting security forces that have reclaimed territory from AQAP. In Somalia, we helped a coalition of African nations push al-Shabaab out of its strongholds. In Mali, we're providing military aid to French-led intervention to push back al-Qaeda in the Maghreb and help the people of Mali reclaim their future. Much of our best counterterrorism cooperation results in the gathering and sharing of intelligence, the arrest and prosecution of terrorists. That's how a Somali terrorist apprehended off the coast of Yemen is now in a prison in New York. That's how we worked with European allies to disrupt plots from Denmark to Germany to the United Kingdom. That's how intelligence collected with Saudi Arabia helped us stop a cargo plane from being blown up over the Atlantic. These partnerships work.
To find them. And then there's misdirection because they don't want them to find something that they're on. So that's how sophisticated this spy versus spy versus spy is at the presidential level.
We are in a brave new world of transparency, a brave new world where the freedom of information is such that people expect it at all times.
Have presidential cover-ups become so sophisticated that the American public will never really know what goes on behind the doors of the Oval Office? Are secret operations, covert wars, and even political assassinations actually being perpetrated by the leaders of the free world?
Under domestic law and international law, the United States is at war with Al-Qaeda, the Taliban, and their associated forces. We are at war with an organization that right now would kill as many Americans as they could if we did not stop them first.
Senator, I am familiar with that report. The commission is familiar with the report. I want to say our own report, you in fact passed the ball along, and further investigations have been going more and more deeply into it. We noted that our private security in Afghanistan appears to be a major source of payoffs to the Taliban. Our report has the first official statement that it's the second largest source of money to the Taliban.
After drugs.
After drugs, that's right.
That's similar to our finding, but here's what followed our report. The Department of Defense established a number of task forces, directed that remedial action be taken. And so the question is, have those task forces been effective? Are they operative? General Petraeus himself told me about the importance of this issue to him. Now, he's kind of the most recent father of a counterinsurgency strategy. And I just am wondering, are you familiar with those task forces? Are they effective? Are they operative?
Well, one of them, according to public sources, came up with a figure of $360 million being paid to the Taliban, so they are at least grappling with the issue.
Did you have a chance to interview those folks?
I interviewed a group of analysts who sort of work for them or with them, and there is one useful thing that's being done, although it's not considered to be enough to get control of the problem. There's a type of vetting using intelligence information which is at least going to keep the bad guys from being direct contractors to us. But that's obviously only a portion of the problem.
We were briefed in Afghanistan about this. Some of it we can't discuss here. Let me say, and I believe I was with Co-Chairman Shays out there, and I think they're clearly getting their arms around the problem. But getting your arms around the problem isn't necessarily solving it. And a lot of this is still clearly going on. And it's going to take some work because, again, a lot of it has to do with what you heard earlier, visibility into subcontracts.
I agree with that very much, as a matter of fact. In the fiscal year 2008 Defense Authorization Bill Act, we had a section, it was called Section 862. And what this required was government-wide regulations to be issued on the selection, training, equipping, and conduct of contractor personnel performing private security functions in Iraq and Afghanistan. So that was in the fiscal year 08 authorization bill. And I'm wondering whether you can tell us whether the federal agencies have complied with the requirements of Section 862.
I can. Can anyone hear? They have issued the guidance and the instructions and it's been out for a public comment. The difference, though, as you are well aware, is that the execution of that, there's a big difference between what the policy says and what's being executed 9 levels below in the field. Also, notably, I believe that the Section 862 makes it up to the chief of mission in the State Department and country whether they are following those regulations. And because of a technicality, I believe in the law, I believe that State Department would have a different view as to whether that applies to them.
But if dealt with smartly and proportionally, these threats need not rise to the level that we saw on the eve of 9/11. Moreover, we have to recognize that these threats don't arise in a vacuum. Most, though not all, of the terrorism we faced is fueled by a common ideology, a belief by some extremists that Islam is in conflict with the United States and the West, and that violence against Western targets, including civilians, is justified in pursuit of a larger cause. Of course, this ideology is based on a lie.
With all due respect, the fact is, we had 4 dead Americans. Was it because of a protest, or was it because of guys out for a walk one night who decided they'd go kill some Americans? What difference at this point does it make?
Know who they are and what they've done for us. They know we love them and that we are indebted to them. To all of you from both of us, thank you. And to those of you who aren't the closest to us, well, maybe you should have stepped it up a notch. It doesn't hurt to have friends with access to drones.
Work of the State Department, of USAID, is measured not only in the value of the dollar, but it's also measured in our deepest values. We value security and stability in other parts of the world, knowing that failed states are among our greatest security threats, and new partners are our greatest assets. The investments that we make support our efforts to counter terrorism and violent extremism wherever it flourishes, and we will continue to help countries provide their own security, use diplomacy where possible, and support those allies who take the fight to terrorists. And remember, well, I can't emphasize this enough. I'm looking at a soldier here in front of me with a ribbon on his chest. Deploying diplomats today is much cheaper than deploying troops tomorrow. We need to remember that. As Senator Lindsey Graham said, it's national security insurance that we're buying.
For the United States is not at war with Islam. And this ideology is rejected by the vast majority of Muslims, who are the most frequent victims of terrorist attacks. Nevertheless, this ideology persists. And in an age when ideas and images can travel the globe in an instant, our response to terrorism can't depend on military or law enforcement alone. We need all elements of national power to win a battle of wills, the battle of ideas. So what I want to discuss here today is the components of such a comprehensive counterterrorism strategy.
Even those who claim that the real cover-up wasn't the involvement of President Ronald Reagan, but the more secret involvement of a man who had been the former director of the CIA, Vice President George Herbert Walker Bush.
The reality of the Iran-Contra affair is all of this was directed from the White House by Vice President George H.W. Bush. Oliver North was directly attached to his staff. Oliver North was later selected to be the fall guy, and above all, prevent the scandal from reaching George H.W. Bush, who of course was preparing his run for president in 1988.
As a historian who admires Ronald Reagan, I think he knew all of it. I just can't conceive of a president giving up that kind of power or forfeiting that kind of power. Iran-Contra turned into a cover-up because the president's men and women around him claimed he didn't know about it. The president himself played along with it.
Do you have any recollection of approving for John Poindexter to send these specific letters to Congress?
Well, again, it's a case of memory. I don't recall.
Coming up.
Sandy Berger was purging the historical record that was intended to incriminate the Clinton administration.
We've become a country with a presidency that thinks it's above the law.
There are some who believe the attack in Benghazi was at the center of an even greater presidential cover-up. One involving a secret CIA outpost located approximately a mile from the U.S. consulate.
when President Obama came into office, he immediately signed an executive order stopping what they call enhanced interrogation torture at CIA facilities overseas. What came up in the Benghazi cover-up is that the CIA was actually holding prisoners in the consulate in Benghazi, which maybe was a reason why there was an attack.
Apparently the compound in Benghazi was not really a consulate. Many believe it was primarily a CIA operation, and nobody exactly knows what the CIA was doing in Benghazi and whether CIA activities were involved with sparking this terrorist attack on the compound.
Is it possible that the CIA facility near the Benghazi consulate was the real target of the Al-Qaeda attack on September 11th? If so, why? Was the compound involved in covert operations? And is this the secret being covered up by the White House?
Some have speculated that the CIA in Libya was recruiting rebel fighters. In other words, if there is a cover-up with respect to Benghazi, it likely comes from the CIA and is still ongoing.
Ambassador Stevens had his last meeting with a Turkish diplomat. Now, why would the U.S. ambassador be meeting a Turkish diplomat in the terror capital of Libya? The CIA was in Benghazi to direct the shipment of weaponry from Gaddafi's arms depots and guerrilla fighters to Turkey so those could be sent into Syria to overthrow Assad. The embarrassing thing about this, of course, for the Obama administration is that they're caught doing this.
Is the U.S. involved with any procuring of weapons, transfer of weapons, buying, selling, anyhow transferring weapons to Turkey out of Libya?
To Turkey? I do not know.
The very nature of the Iranian actions in Syria now suggests to me that they're very nervous about the Assad regime's long-term prospects. They are plussing up. Their assistants are plussing up their people on the ground. They're plussing up what they're sending in. That doesn't sound like a confident stance to me. That sounds like they're nervous, and they ought to be nervous. I mentioned before about how the military balance has shifted strongly against the regime in a war of attrition.
Is it a nervousness because of the situation on the ground or because of specifically what we're doing? I'm asking, are we helping that nervousness or are we just kind of not?
Absolutely, we help that nervousness, Congressman. Let me give you an example. You know, a lot of this war is being fought on video.
Right.
And much of the equipment that provides the YouTube videos that you see, that I see, that actually comes from us. Good. We are the ones that are helping the opposition both get information from the outside world through the internet and also to upload stuff back to the rest of planet Earth. For example, the chairman in his opening remarks talked about the devastation to the city of Homs.
Right.
We have worked very closely with the Homs Provincial Revolution Council to make sure they can stay in touch with planet Earth.
United Nations Ambassador Susan Rice appears on 5 Sunday talk shows and blames the attack on a spontaneous reaction to an anti-Muslim YouTube video.
What sparked the recent violence was the airing on the internet of a very hateful, very offensive video.
But when intelligence reports later indicate that the president and his staff had earlier evidence that the attack was the work of Al-Qaeda, questions begin to be asked. Was the American public being told the truth?
After the embassy was attacked in Benghazi, a lot of people questioned what the White House knew when they knew it.
Some claim that the terrorist attack was covered up by the Obama administration. Now, why would the Obama administration want to cover this up? This administration would want would be embarrassing information coming out on the eve of the election.
They blame a YouTube video for sparking the attack, but Al-Qaeda terrorists took responsibility for it.
Clearly,
were intelligence failures, there clearly was great confusion about what had happened.
The administration made a mistake.